Jesus testifies to the churches, "And behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give everyone according to his work. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. But outside are dogs and sorcerers, and sexually immoral, and murderers, and idolaters, and whoever loves and practices a lie." Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Welcome to He Sees Us All YouTube and Bitchute channel. I'm sure everybody noticed the new intro for the channel. We have a new outro as well. You'll get to see that at the end of this video. And I would like to personally thank Cody Hunsberger Music. He has a small channel here on YouTube, and I will link it down in the description box. If anybody would like to head on over there, I would greatly encourage you do so and show him some support. He does really great work. He did all of the music, customized it, and then I just added the imagery afterwards. And I think his channel should be a lot bigger than it is. So if you guys want to check it out, again, his link will be in the description box. Now, what I just read to you was from the very last page of the Bible, and I'm doing so with good reason. I just read from Revelation chapter 22, verses 12 through 15. But what I want everyone to give notice to is verse 13 in particular. "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last." And this is because that verse specifically has been ringing in my head since hearing about the name they've chosen to give the generation following Generation Z. And that name is Generation Alpha. Now, some people call me crazy for some of the things that I pick up on, but I promise you, anyone whose eyes have been opened, I don't think can ignore what I'm about to present. As always, I advise everyone watch this video until the end. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can, but every bit of information I have to share with you guys is extremely important. And I really think you all want to hear what I believe is my responsibility to tell as many who are willing to listen as I possibly can. The whole generational naming for the West has the satanic agenda clearly embedded right into it. I've been trying to connect all of the dots for a while now, and I had what I thought was a huge revelation the other night. And when I followed my instincts, confirmed everything I had been feeling about the why in naming the coming generations as such. So what brought this topic to my attention was this article from HuffPost.com. And when reading it, I began to sort of fall down this rabbit hole. And I've said this before, but I want to quickly reiterate, our world is mathematically made, and numerology and gematria can play a major role in manipulating reality. Now, I think that the fallen have figured out how to manipulate our reality to better suit their agendas, which I promise you have no positive outcomes for humanity. And when I started looking into this deeper than what you just see at the surface, I could see Lucifer's signature all over this matter. This whole thing even brought me to a Poppy video, which is where this all really got a bit too coincidental for me, and quite frankly was just flat out scary to put together. But I'll get to that in a minute, and I'll explain exactly how I got there too. But I want to present this to you guys in the order that will make the most sense to everyone, or at least in the order that I came about it all. So before I start reading the article, I want to just give a baseline for us to start with. And I want to do that by very quickly going over the 6 generations of the past century. I want to point out everything that was really interesting to me and a couple of things that don't make a whole lot of sense unless you start looking at this from a spiritual angle. And again, the only reason this video even became a thought in my mind was because of the names they chose for the coming generations, starting with Alpha and then with plans to proceed through the Greek alphabet and end on Omega. I couldn't get the verse from Revelation out of my head at that point, and I started to think that there was something really important to all this. I just didn't know what it was yet, so I started to dig. My first questions were pretty simple and were what ultimately led me down this rabbit hole. I wanted to know when we started naming generations, why, and how many we've named thus far. And I quickly found out that there were 6 generations, but what didn't make a whole lot of sense to me was how these generations were divided. We had 1900 to 1924 being 24 years, then 1925 to 1945 being 20 years, 1946 to 1964 being 18, 1965 to 1979 being 14 years, and finally 1980 to the late 90s, and then the late 90s to the 2010s, oddly being very unspecific to the total number of years per generation, giving us our grand total of 6 generations, which by itself, I guess you could say, doesn't seem too strange yet. So then I started wondering about the names themselves, like why start at Generation X? I mean, I get that technically it started with the GI generation, but that name was given before generational naming was actually a thing. Today we credit generational naming to these two men. Neil Howe and William Strauss are usually credited with identifying and naming U.S. 20th century generations in their 1991 book titled Generations. Most of these labels stuck. In this study, the two historians identified the generation that fought World War II as the GI, or short for government issue, generation, but this name would soon be replaced less than a decade later by a man named Tom Brokaw. So, generational naming actually became a thing in 1991. That's when it was solidified. Now, one could really argue that the reason for starting with Generation X and having the years per generation be literally all over the place was as simple as these Satanists wanting to have a total of 6 generations per the last century. The things we do, the names we give things, even the thoughts we all have, all generate their own energy. And this energy can and is used by the fallen. Think of it as a recipe. You need specific ingredients to make specific dishes, right? You wouldn't buy peaches or cherries to make an apple pie. Well, our reality is somewhat similar, and to an entity that quite possibly exists in a dimension above ours, they would know exactly how much and what type of energy is needed for their recipe for disaster. And this is where numerology and Jewish gematria tie in. In a reality so based off of mathematics, so perfectly made, manipulation or even hacking, in a sense, by an outside entity could always be an issue. I hope I'm making some kind of sense here. I'm sure some people will think that's a stretch, but bear with me because it's definitely going to get much weirder as we move on. This is just where I started with all of this, where my mind was, and where I wanted you all to start as well, with all of the generations of the past. Now that I've got your mind hopefully where mine was when I went into all this, I want to read this article with you guys. Unfortunately, most of the pages are blindingly bright because I couldn't get this article in a reader format for whatever reason, but this article specifically is what led me to what I'm going to share with you guys. At a couple of different points, I even started to feel like this whole thing was written by an AI or even a demon, just because of the way some of the things are worded. Anyone who has the eyes to see will see Lucifer's signature all over this matter. What's the deal with Generation Alpha? These are the defining characteristics of today's youngest generation according to demographers and other experts. For years, it seemed news outlets were fixated on the millennial generation, also known as Generation Y, and many items and industries it supposedly killed. Before that, there was Generation X, also known as the MTV generation. Now there's a strong interest in Generation Z, the mysterious euphoria cohort. So this is where I was led to yet another satanic agenda that we talk about quite often here on the channel. When I clicked on the euphoria cohort link that the article provides, out of curiosity as to what they meant by that, I was led to this page. Euphoria and the Flawed Art of Gen Z Prophesying. Now, this article talks about Generation Z basically as a sexual generation. And remember, Gen Z is considered the late 90s to the 2010s, so we are really talking anywhere from 10 to 20 years old. So yes, some of them are in college, but with what Hollywood, the media, and even our public school system now is pushing as normal behavior for children, it's really hard to argue that the end goal is not to normalize sexual situations and children. This article starts out with the sentence, attempts to know the soul of the new generation always tremble with the fetishes and embarrassments of aging ones. Then it goes on to talk about a different article that was in Newsweek that portrayed a group of smiling multi-ethnic students that had been, and I quote, raised by cynics, and how that has somehow made them some kind of superheroes who will save the economy, stop climate change, and not just that. They will avoid the mistakes of their sinner predecessors and will be the new age patriots and effective workers who will pull the planet back into orbit. New age patriots and effective workers who will pull our planet back into orbit. Or the controlled hive mind cleaning up after an apocalyptic event. You tell me. Then it goes on about a show on HBO that is considered to be a teen drama, but the president of Parents Television Council warned that the show appears to be overtly, intentionally marketing extremely graphic adult content, sex, violence, profanity, and drug use to teens and preteens. And then it says, Euphoria, which is interestingly naive itself, will destroy the innocence only of adults who wish to maintain the illusion that sex, violence, profanity, and drug use, not to mention revenge porn, are not in the province of high school life. It also says there are dead-eyed, graphic sex scenes, non-consensual sex tapes, beatings, underage camming, and chronic male nudity, all a part of this show. That, again, they call a teen drama. Now, please, someone tell me again that the promotion of pedophiles is not a thing. And also, that the powers that be are not trying to sexualize our children with the ultimate goal of abolishing the age of consent. They don't even want to be called pedophiles anymore. The media is trying to push the term minor attracted persons like it's some kind of normal sexual preference. And one more thing, if this is a show about teenagers, who are they using as actors? They are trying to portray sexual scenarios between minors on a television show. This should be considered child pornography. And even if the actors are of age but just look young, does this not encourage society to think that it is okay to watch children in these types of scenarios? Now again, tell me that there is not an agenda to sexualize children and normalize pedophilia. I guess doing this to the final generation of the century was just a way to open the door for Lucifer to lead the coming new world. Now back to the original article. But what comes after X, Y, and Z? Some consider the final nature of those labels to be a perfect metaphor for the state of the world. Then it shows this tweet that says, I love that the generation after millennials is called Generation Z. Like we all kind of know this whole thing is wrapping up soon. Can we just say agenda, mind control, the masses being led to slaughter, just accepting it as it comes? I mean, really. Then it says, still, as long as people are continuing to procreate, there must be a name for the generation that follows Generation Z in some sense of its defining characteristics. This is what I meant when I said I felt like this article was written by an AI or a demon. It's like multiple different satanic agendas are just nonchalantly mentioned throughout. This is exactly what I'm referring to when I say the fallen can manipulate our reality. It's like their recipe for disaster is laid out, and Monsanto and other forms of sterilization currently being force-fed to humanity, like vaccines and giving young boys puberty blockers, And the weather control, Agenda 21, the New World Order, the leaps in quantum computing, and sexualizing children are all different ingredients for this recipe that the Fallen and Lucifer have put together. They are all different paths that will ultimately lead to one specific outcome. I want to keep going with this article because I want to show you guys how I was led to the very disturbing Poppy videos and where this research really started to feel important to me. So what are those characteristics? HuffPost spoke to demographers and other experts studying generational shifts to find out. Meet Generation Alpha. In 2005, social researcher Mark McCrindle coined the term Generation Alpha to identify the group born after Generation Z. He defines the generation as those born from 2010 to 2024, while Gen Z spans from 1995 to 2009, and Gen Y spans from 1980 to 1994, though many push the millennial birth years back a bit later. So that's where we get the reference of the late 90s to the 2010s and not being very specific about the years there. The emerging generations these days sound a bit like alphabet soup, McCrindle told HuffPost over email. Just over a decade ago, when I was researching my first book, The ABC of XYZ, Understanding the Global Generations, it became apparent that a new generation was about to commence and that there was no name for them. So I conducted a survey to find out what people think the generation after Generation Z should be called. While the survey produced many names, Generation A was the most commonly mentioned. But that term didn't sit well with McCrindle. It didn't make sense that the new generation, the first to be fully born into the 22nd century, to be labeled by going back to the beginning, he wrote. Now, I'd just like to quickly mention that we never started with Generation A, so technically, that wouldn't be going back to the beginning, now would it? I think calling the new generation Generation Alpha is so much more than just a name. Instead, he looked to the model of hurricane names. There were so many storms during the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season that the names ran through the usual Roman or Latin alphabet and had to use the Greek alphabet. In keeping with this scientific nomenclature of using the Greek alphabet in lieu of the Latin having got to Generation Z, I settled on the next cohort being Generation Alpha. Not a return to the old, but the start of something new, said McCrindle. So, I guess his survey didn't really matter then, did it? It sounds like this was all a pretty unilateral decision to me. And next is what they say will be the key characteristics of the coming generations. While the traits that come to define generations often don't start to manifest until their members' adolescence or early adulthood, it's possible to identify certain notable features of Generation Alpha at this point. The share of this new generation spending at least part of their early formative years in living arrangements that do not include both of their biological parents is higher than any generation observed in the previous century, said Elwood Carlson, a demographer and professor of sociology at Florida State University. Can we just say, the destruction of the family unit? Yet another Luciferian agenda? When you look at a child in this generation, you never know what kind of family life they have experienced. Carlson also noted that this newest generation in the U.S. will have a high share of children with foreign-born parents and children who are foreign-born themselves, representing more countries around the world than previous generations. And there's the hint towards the New World or One World Order. Racial diversity is another feature of the newest generation, according to William H. Frey, a demographer and current senior fellow with the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. Already Generation Zers in the U.S. are minority white, but I think as we get into this new generation, this will be something that in a way defines them in terms of their ability to accept people of different backgrounds. And the idea of racial division may not exist to them to the extent that it exists in our country now, he said. Frey and Carlson also noted that the new generation will face more economic inequality. So, the poor will continue to get poorer while the rich continue to get richer. I mean, obviously, that has always been the plan. The range of household incomes experienced by children in this new generation is wider than for any previous generation in at least half a century for two reasons, said Carlson. First, the inequality of wealth and income has been growing wider and wider in American society generally. And second, the births of children have been concentrating among the have-nots. The people with the money don't have the children, and the people with the children don't have the money. The people with the money want to stop the peasants from procreating, and they also finance many of these projects to not only sterilize society as a whole through vaccines and the foods we eat, but also the projects trying to figure out how to transfer consciousness into machines. These people wish to live forever. Now, I want to skip through some of this just for the sake of time. I'll put a link to the article in the description box down below just in case anybody wants to read the whole thing for themselves. This next part, just so everyone knows, is about how Generation Alpha is also Generation Glass, going on to say how this generation is being raised on screens in a sense that is unlike any generation previous, as we had televisions, but children today have screens in their laps that they can interact with. It also says that this generation may even prefer the virtual world over the real one, which, once again, would be yet another agenda that is currently rolling out. I think Generation Alpha may be some of the first who will willingly receive the mark of the beast, and this is a really scary thought to me. I think this will be the generation who decides that it's a good idea to implant chips in themselves, for security reasons, and even possibly be a part of a coming hive mind. And finally, I want to show you guys what ultimately led me to a Poppy video and what I ended up finding there. The end of this article states, what comes after Alpha? If the members of Generation Alpha are coming into the world today, it may also be time to look forward to what the following generation will be. Generational definitions are most useful when they span a set range and so allow meaningful comparisons across generations, said McCrindle, emphasizing that he identifies Generation Alpha as spanning the years 2010 to 2024, so it follows that Generation Beta will be born from 2025 to 2039, he continued. If the nomenclature sticks, then we will afterwards have Generation Gamma and Generation Delta, but we won't be getting there until the second half of the 21st century. I think they meant the 22nd century there, but whatever. So there's plenty of time to reflect on labels. Now, I just want to point out, McCrindle emphasized the span of years per generation, which I thought was really interesting. So I wondered, how many years would it take to cycle through the Greek alphabet if you were to stick with 14 years per each letter and generation? There are 24 letters in the Greek alphabet, and if you are to multiply 14 by 24, you will get a total of 336 years. 336. And that's how I was led to the very satanic Poppy videos.
336? 336? Oh no, I'm late. I'm so sorry, but I have to get going. 3 plus 3 equals 6. I can't believe it's 336. It's 336. I have to get going. Why am I late for this appointment? 3 plus 3 equals 6. I can't believe it's already 336. I've got to get going. What does it mean? What does it mean? 336? Is it 336 already? I'm already late. I have to go.
Notice how in that clip 336 is a reference to time? I don't think they mean it as in the way they show it on the surface. It's not a reference to 3:36 a.m. or p.m. It's a reference to the coming generations in the 336 years. And the door between us and the fallen being opened. You cannot deny that the devil is way more prevalent today in all societies than ever before. All of these different agendas have the signature of Satan embedded right into them. Much like humans, demons, and even Lucifer himself will leave behind a specific signature when something is of their doing. And that's what I think we are observing here, and many other times when we see demons work through individual human beings. Now, what made this extra disturbing was that Poppy has some song as well called 336. And when that song is played backwards, some really, really disturbing things are said. And what's more disturbing is it still almost sounds like a song when it's played backwards. A really irritating song, but a song nonetheless. And just as a quick disclaimer, I've altered all of the videos being used for copyright reasons, so they are slightly different than what you would see if you were to watch the original videos. And I'm only going to play clips of the video playing the song backwards. I'll link the whole thing in the description if you want to hear it in its entirety. It was just way too annoying to play at any length of time for me. So this is what I have for you guys. As I mentioned, these videos are really annoying, but I really want you to listen to the next couple clips, and remember, this is from the song titled 336. Now, I personally found that a bit disturbing, talking about, hey, can I get on through? Glad I can get through on. And Baphomet, hurry, get him through. Him, get him through that mirror, I'll get there. The next one is really messed up as well. Spend the life summoning them. This is exactly what the elite in Hollywood are trying to get everyone to do. This is the influence the powers that be would like to push onto society. And never mind the scrying mirrors that are in everyone's hands and homes for these entities to use as open doorways. Then the song plays the same "follow me or be dead" chorus repeatedly. It kept repeating this line many times throughout the whole video. Now, I don't know about you guys, but me, I think all of that was pretty disturbing. And I feel when we stumble into things like this, we are seeing the imprint that demonic entities leave behind when they are what has influenced people to make or produce certain things. And the devil has a signature as well. In Generation Alpha, with plans to end on Omega, a total of 336 years, when God said He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. And this generation being so different from ours, and being so because of the advancements we've made with technology, I think with AI, we may be getting something so much more than artificial intelligence. I tend to question how artificial that intelligence really is. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please be sure to join me in my next one. I have multiple different projects started right now, and what I'm coming to realize more and more lately is how related to each other they all are. I'm really starting to envision all of these agendas as multiple different sidewalks from multiple different directions, all leading to the same monument in the middle. And people are just lining up on each walkway like the good cattle that they've become. Please be sure to give this video a like, comment down below, and let me know what you all think about all of this. And don't forget to share it anywhere you can. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I love you guys. All of the links will be in the description box down below. And may you all stay aware, stay awake, and stay vigilant. Stay blessed.